You know, a good part of my role is to understand the problems and the challenges and the progress that your institutions are making with educational technology specific to your contexts. And that's exciting because it gives us a glimpse as to where educational technology is going. Now, through experience, those of you who have been in ed tech for a while probably understand that technology by itself does not improve student outcomes. It's the people who use technology that do just that. And yet, many of us look to technology to trigger the next wave of innovation in education. I want to start this morning with an example of where technology did just that. This is maybe a little bit obscure, perhaps not what you're expecting, but it is skateboarding. Now, like many fields, skateboarding has seen small incremental improvements over time, marked by a few periods of massive change that challenged everything that we thought we knew about the field. And one of those moments happened in the 1980s. There was a huge explosion of innovation almost out of the blue that changed the sport forever. Now, Stacy Peralta talks about this. He points out that in the 80s, skaters really just had access to the tricks and the moves of their local community that their friends knew, or maybe what they could decipher from still images in magazines. Then came the VCR. Now, in the United States, VCRs were in nearly every single home in the 80s, and skateboard companies decided to start making low-budget tapes of their professionals and sending those out to the skate shops. Now, we in the skater community, we ate these up because suddenly we had access to what all the best skaters around the world were doing, and we saw things that were different than anything we had ever known about before. So we watched these videos, and we rewound them, and we replayed them on slow motion, and then we went out and we tried those tricks. Now, we had to adapt those to our local terrain, and in doing so, we figured out new variations, new tricks of our own, and so many of us started making our own skate tapes. So this is a case where a single technology, broadly adopted, unexpectedly ignited a new wave of innovation. I believe we are at a similar moment with educational technology, as online and hybrid learning has entered the mainstream and continues to grow in popularity and in utility. A recent EDUCAUSE report that surveyed faculty found that 71% of university teaching faculty now prefer a blended mode versus a face-to-face mode. That's very encouraging for us, especially as we try to tackle today's biggest challenges. Now, that idea that faculty want to be blended, that they want to embrace technology, that's why we made Canvas in the first place, right? Fundamentally, we're here to make teaching and learning easier for everyone. But schools and colleges and universities, we're now seeking to engage a broader audience of students and to ensure that we provide success for each and every one of those. So we have to go beyond simply facilitating teaching with technology to simplifying great teaching and learning and more. Because society is asking education to do more, to ensure the success for each of those students with a new definition of student success. Now, of course, we know there's a problem with students falling through the cracks. We need each and every student to have a fighting chance to complete their education and to move on. In higher education, this is usually where conversations about student success start, but it's not where they end. Because in the 21st century, we also know that student success means that we are developing our students into self-directed, lifelong learners. And yet, many of our students struggle to learn independently. They don't come to us with the habits of an effective learner, an autonomous learner, and oftentimes we don't spend the time to develop those skills in them. And yet we know that in today's rapidly changing world, those students are going to be facing an uncertain future with respect to their careers and the competencies that they are required to have. And so they're going to have to continue to develop their skills and competencies, and they're not necessarily going to have us available to them. Although maybe, we'll come back to that later. And the third piece in the student success puzzle is helping those students face that uncertain future, ensuring that they are ready for the world today and the world tomorrow. So this morning, I have the chance to share with you some stories and some examples of how broad-scale adoption of technology is necessary to, and in some ways can amplify our efforts to innovate, and more importantly, to experiment with EdTech for greater student success. And I've even got a couple of skate tapes from the States that I'm going to show to you that illustrate these examples of how we must use technology to empower people to build their own awesome, and how we can leverage the data that's produced, but let's do so to develop self-directed learning. And then finally, how we can connect learning to beyond the classroom, to our communities and the companies in which students will enter and likely serve. Now, my primary domain is higher education, and as I said, student success there often begins with completion. How do we increase completion rates, graduation rates? Now, this isn't just because many higher eds are under pressure to increase these rates because of budgetary concerns or state pressure or even societal pressure. It's because the data shows that a student who gets almost to the end of an educational cycle, almost to the degree, almost to the diploma, doesn't really benefit economically. It's only those students who meet that milestone, who hit that finish line, who get the economic benefits. Now, the data shows that the average 6-year completion rate in many countries is around 2/3, around 66%. Yours may be higher at your institution, and that's really because these statistics do a bad job of representing individuals. So we need to look at some specific cases. I want to share a story with you from the US, from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, which just a few years back had the lowest 6-year graduation rate in all of the USA. Just 1 out of every 4 students would graduate. 1 out of 4. Now, they're not a statistic. They're a unique place. They are a research university, but they're situated in one of the most economically challenged cities in the US. And the majority of their students are what we would call non-traditional or mature age. They are commuter students who come into campus from outside of the area. But a few years back, they set out on an aggressive goal to double that graduation rate from 25% to 50%. And it required a lot of work in a lot of different areas. But I'm going to show you a video here that highlights one of their efforts that helped them get there.
With Wayne State, they like, okay, well, yeah, you got into college, but we're gonna show you how to stay in college. We're gonna show you how to help other people in college. We're gonna introduce you to some things you ain't never seen before. I feel like Wayne State is just a big melting pot of everybody.
A lot of our students are working and pursuing their education at the same time. I was a young mom and pursuing my degree as well as, starting a family, so that's definitely relatable.
I wake up around 5 o'clock, because I gotta get ready first. In order for me to get my little brother ready, I gotta get ready. I have step team, I have mommy duties with my little brother, I have daddy duties with my dad, I have work, I have 3 jobs, I have to study here at Wayne State.
We are always mindful of the diverse student population that we serve. We learn of their needs from the students in order to tailor the programs that best support student success.
Students were having a hard time making time to come to tutoring, and we weren't really reaching them through the traditional methods. Our tutoring integration essentially just maps students to our tutoring options automatically based on their schedule. We were able to make it really feel like a part of Canvas. We're really proud of it. I mean, it's really increased the number of students who come to tutoring.
It takes a lot of courage for students to seek help. So when students come to us, we want to make sure that we provide that positive experience that students will return.
If you needed help, you had tutors on board all the time, sitting in the library waiting for you, just want you to come, coming to you like, oh, you need help? What you need help with? That was the first time I ever heard someone tell me, what do you need help with? It made me want to go, because now I feel like I have a friend.
The big change we've seen is more interest in coming to the tutoring center, more attendance, hiring more tutors. To me, if you have to hire more tutors, that's a really good problem, because that means the students are coming to tutoring and they're getting help.
When we talk about the increased usage in tutoring, for example, that can have a very high correlation to our retention and our graduation rate.
They are the future. They are invested in learning, and we are charged with being good stewards of their learning process. So unless we are connected to their concerns and their real world challenges, then I don't think we're really doing our jobs.
Why do it? Because everybody is looking at you. I know kids look at me because it's the fact of the matter, I'm setting an example. See me walk across the day saying, oh, she got on a cap and gown and she black. Oh, she came where I came from. So if she can do it, and she came from the same block that I came from the same city that I came from, oh, I know I can do it. Oh, she make it look good. Oh, we can do it. As soon as I graduate Wayne State, as soon as I walk across that stage, I will tell you this right now. That next hour, I'm going to the library. Because now I got a bigger game to get to. I got to be in law school.
So in some ways, Wayne State is about giving students a second chance. And in other ways, it's about undoing some of the systemic challenges that these students face as they seek to improve their lives and achieve their goals. But regardless of whether or not you can relate to Wayne State or the students or the staff, what we know is that academic work is at the heart of student success, and engaging students in this academic work can make a big difference in their academic success long term. Now, this is especially important for what we call non-traditional or mature age students who may have forgotten some of the foundational knowledge that they developed in school, some of those habits of learning. We know that 3 out of 4 students who need remedial classes in college or university will never graduate. And so it's no wonder that a similar survey found that 9 out of 10 non-traditional age students say that having more advising and tutoring available to them would make coming back to higher ed more attractive. So what I really love about this Wayne State story is, of course, the way they're using technology. Starting where they're at, taking advantage of some of their strengths that they have. For example, that they have between 80 and 90% Canvas adoption in any given semester, to create something for the students that makes tutoring and advising very conspicuous. Because Canvas is central to many of those students' daily activities, putting their advising scheduling tool inside of Canvas makes a lot of sense and drove a lot of use of that system and resulted in the benefits that you see in that video. The idea that adoption of Canvas is fundamental to so many innovations and experiments is something that we see across the Canvas community. So depending on where you are, what Wayne State is doing might seem small. What Wayne State might be doing could seem big to you. But one of the things that also stands out beyond the technology is how Wayne State embraces their students, figuratively and perhaps literally. So I liked how this story, everyone in the institution is committed to the students' success, and the way that they're using technology, in my opinion, is the right way. It's not to replace a human, it's to strengthen the connections between people, and that's what the Wayne State students need. Now, CanvasCon is often where I first hear about those kinds of innovations with Canvas, with those DIY solutions that are built specific for your problems. And they're very exciting. So for us, we've always believed that the technology should empower people to build their own awesome, whether that's a teaching faculty member or an instructor who finds their own tools to plug into Canvas through LTI or the EduApp Center, or that's a smart individual, a motivated technologist, building their own tool to solve a specific challenge. Empowering the people to build their own awesome is important because every institution has its own unique challenges and their own unique contexts. And some of this is around using those open standards like Wayne State has used. But more and more, and especially as we see adoption of Canvas grow, institutions are looking to the data to build solutions as well. University of Central Florida has built what they call a student performance dashboard. And when I say student dashboard, that's exactly what I mean. It's for the students. So not only does this aggregate data from Canvas, it takes data from other sources as well so that students understand their progress toward degree. And it even gives them an exaggerated version or an amplified version of what-if grades so that they can set their own goals for each of their courses in each semester and track their progress toward that. This is one way that University of Central Florida is trying to help students take more responsibility and ownership for their learning path and to make them aware of the challenges that they might face in the future. Now, UCF is also doing some really interesting work with data to help early identify students who might be at risk. Now, not necessarily of dropping out of the program, although that's part of it, but at risk of being subject to certain mental health concerns that can happen when you're in a very stressful environment and you're facing a lot of different challenges for the first time in your life. They want to identify those students who might be at risk of mental health challenges so that they can reach out and intervene early before it's too late. Now, this idea of empowering students is something that we obviously believe strongly in, and you're going to hear more about that as we talk about new course analytics a little bit later today. As important as it is that institutions commit to understanding and supporting students' path through school or college, and as life-changing as individual teachers can be, we can't forget that all of this is dependent on what the students do, that achievement starts with habits. And we want our students to take responsibility for their own learning. We want students to become those self-directed learners, and yet, as we know, many students don't come to us with those habits, and we don't always provide them with the training that they need. So one of the things we've been exploring with Canvas, especially as we've seen many institutions grow their adoption to 80 and 90%, is whether or not we can use Canvas to nudge students toward better learning habits. Now, some of you may remember hearing about the first nudge prototype at last year's CanvasCon. This was based on the fact that frequent formative activities support learning, and having assignments early on in a course, especially in an online course, can help students engage and help teachers understand which students will need the most help. Now, the flip side of this is if you're providing students with a lot of activities or assignments, if they miss one, they can easily feel like they've fallen behind, and that can be detrimental to their motivation. So we said something very, very simple. If you have an assignment coming due and you haven't turned it in, let's nudge you to turn that in and see if that makes a difference. Okay? So we'll automatically send you a notification if you have an assignment that's coming due and you haven't turned it in. And it looks something like this. So we encourage the students to turn it in by referencing their peers, and it comes through Canvas through their normal communication channels, whether that's text message, email, the mobile app, as you see here. And what we found in the early pilots was that, yes, this increases on-time submissions by as much as 10% from our fall pilot. And that was a cohort of 10 different modules with 190 students in the experimental group. And we found that 78% of the nudges that were sent were viewed by students, and only about 3% of students opted out, because of course it's important that students have the ability to opt out of these kinds of things. And so this evidence supports the underlying idea that we can leverage data, but not just to support teachers, to actually support students as they develop their self-directedness and their autonomy. Now, even though these early iterations of nudge were effective, I knew that they were still kind of dumb. That is to say, the system would send you a nudge even if you were just about to click the submit button on your assignments, right? And we know that a lot of students are different. Some students, they turn in every assignment on time and sometimes early. Some students wait till the last minute and maybe forget, like that was me in college. And other students might turn things in one class, like English, but not in another class that's less interesting, like chemistry. I'm not saying chemistry is not interesting. So we wanted to make Nudge smarter than that. We wanted to make Nudge individualized, personalized, if you will. And so that's what we did this last year. We took Nudge and we worked with machine learning to help it understand each student as an individual and to make some predictions about whether or not a student needed a nudge because they weren't going to turn an assignment in, and whether or not they would actually respond to a nudge if we gave them one. And we started thinking, maybe we need to do experiments with Nudge whereby we send notifications at different times of the day to optimize when a student is going to be receptive to the nudge and take action upon it. So this is the prototype that we've been working on since January, and we've already gone through a full pilot phase, and we are in the second pilot phase right now. Now that individualization is important in part because nobody wants more information, more messages. We want to eliminate as much noise as possible. We want to simplify students' experience. And we also know that some kinds of nudges can actually be demotivating to students who are already intrinsically so. We also know that for the future, nudging can go way beyond just assignments, and so we want to make sure that it is very focused, like a laser, on the things that are actually going to matter to the students who actually need them. And so in this last pilot that ran over the summer, we did see an increase in on-time submissions, as we did with the first pilot, but we actually saw an overall lift in students who were submitting assignments, and we halved the standard deviation for student submissions, which was pretty phenomenal. One of the administrators in that summer nudge pilot said that ordinarily about 30% of their students need administrative support during the semester. This was an online program. And during the nudge pilot, they were about 13%, which to me, when you don't see any detriments, and in fact you see positive outcomes on student learning, suggests that this is going in the right direction in terms of individualizing nudges to help students build the right habits. Because the way that we think about this, nudging is not just about turning assignments in on time. It's about providing a kind of scaffolding for students that we can automatically lessen over time. Because nudge doesn't learn about an individual and then just stop. It needs to continually update its reference model so that it knows what to expect from you at any given point in time. And ideally, the reason why we lessen nudges is because we see, or we predict, that students' ability to self-manage is increasing over time. So this is where nudge is going, toward that individualization, toward scaffolding the kinds of habits that students need, and beyond just assignments. And part of this, for me, is very fulfilling because we know that students will develop excellence and autonomy when they get better at self-assessment and self-adjustment, and this is just the start. Now, part of why it's important for us to help those students develop those effective learning habits is we want them to be autonomous, motivated learners who can adapt to the world beyond our classrooms and institutions. As the growth of information accelerates, as it transforms what we think we know about the world, and as technology honestly threatens to pull the rug out from many careers, it's no wonder that many in society are asking education to do more, prepare students for that uncertain future. So I want to talk about one more story that I've brought with me. This addresses that very challenge. Escondido Union High School District in San Diego, California, they have been experimenting with and iterating on the idea that pathways which connect students to the world beyond the classroom can have a positive impact on both their outcomes and their confidence and their future. Let's watch.
Our pursuit in education, especially here at Del Lago Academy, is equity, right? We want to make sure that we give scholars everything that they need in order to be successful and achieve at high levels and fall in love with learning and fall in love with innovation. But if they're coming from really diverse backgrounds, which they are, we need to give them something to level the playing field. and technology can serve as that platform.
We're not seeing students from the population we serve accessing many of the internships and workforce opportunities that exist within the biotechnology industry. Oftentimes, that access is determined by who you know. We want to broaden that participation by the diverse learners within our district, and every learner can participate.
If we can take a scholar who has never had a mentor in the biotechnology field and we give them an e-mentor program and we connect them with a scientist at a biotechnology firm, then the scholar is able to leverage this piece of technology in their hand to access an experience that they would otherwise not have any access to.
It really gives kids the opportunity to try out things they might, well, in some cases never be able to try out. It allows them to see things in a different light. One of the things that I always come away with is when I get to visit kids, I get to see certain kids that might struggle academically, and you see them at their internship, and it's like, wow, you know, yeah, how do you do that? You're so good at it, or they fit right in.
The previous paradigm of science learning, it's knowledge transmission. It's about the ideas. It's about the content. The new vision for science learning is about enabling our students to be scientists.
We recruited our Biocom member company, Life Sciences HR professionals, to specifically talk about what they want in their entry-level employees and in their interns. And so there you have a direct connection between what employers who are hiring in the life sciences field are expecting, and then a tangible way for students to go through activities, create artifacts, and earn those badges.
What we do in school, we can show on Portfolium and have it in the future hopefully translate to real work experience.
Here at Del Lago, we focus more on getting ready for the next step. That's what Del Lago honors, and it's not about just passing classes, it's about achieving, getting into the workforce, getting into college.
You don't necessarily think of high school being connected to the work environment, so it's really nice to have that idea of, hey, what I do here in school matters, and that's really going to help me in the future.
One of the great challenges of education is to make the invisible visible. And in teaching, we often think about that in terms of assessment. In students, we often think about that in terms of metacognition. In their pathways, we think about that in terms of making visible to students the opportunities, the challenges, and the requirements to achieve the future that they want. Now, in this video, they talk about their program called Competency X. And that name comes from the idea that there are these missing X-factor competencies that the students will need in order to thrive. And Alex and his team identified those with the help of San Diego's local biotech industry. And some of these were very domain-specific, like modern research and design practices in science and engineering. But others were more broad, like crafting and delivering an effective elevator pitch. Now, for Del Lago, identifying the competency gaps wasn't enough. They needed students to master those, and they wanted students to think about their progress. Perhaps more importantly, they wanted to open doors for students to apply their learning, and in this case, that was through internships. Competency X's vision of student success reiterates what we also believe for the future of Canvas, that in order for education to help students succeed beyond the classroom, we must connect to learning beyond the classroom. Now, this idea is very well developed and understood in some colleges and certain schools, that giving students direct exposure to career paths helps them transfer their knowledge to the real world and builds in them the confidence that they need to move forward on their own. Now, let me take a moment to walk you through some of the mechanics of how Competency X worked with Canvas and Portfolium. Alex and his team worked with Biocom, which was a local representative of the biotech industry, to identify those competencies. And they also worked with local colleges, Miramar and Palomar, to ensure that the competencies resulted in micro-credentials or badges that students could earn and that would stack over time and result in college credit that would articulate throughout the state. Now, students' work is done, of course, in Canvas assignments. Their progress along the competency pathway was organized through Portfolium's badge link tool. And at the center of this is the idea that each student creates and maintains a portfolio that brings to life those micro-credentials and those artifacts directly from Canvas. The data is then used by Talent Match in Portfolium to match students with those internship opportunities. And that, of course, can lead to more achievements for their e-portfolio. Now, those e-portfolios are student-owned for life, so they can, of course, help students in the next step, whether that's college, university, or career. This idea of guiding students toward pathways that connect with their career is becoming increasingly popular in colleges, universities, and even schools that we talk to. For example, at Swinburne University of Technology in Australia, their vision, similar to Del Lago's, is that at the intersection of the personal, the societal, and the professional is professional purpose, and that they want to target students toward their own unique professional purpose by discovering how those three spheres interact. And they are piloting Portfolium in a similar way, primarily, though, to help students curate and share the significant examples of their work and achievement that their prospective employers might care about. So this is a fuller picture than a diploma or a degree or a resume, and it's one that students own and continue to own even after they've left the institution. And that for us was such an important factor as we looked at Portfolium and we brought them into the Instructure family. It's one of the things that I love most about them. Not only do students own the e-portfolio for a lifetime, they can connect their profiles to a growing network of other learners and skills. And of course, the tools integrate with the institutional systems that you need them to, but they aren't trapped within those systems. They're always owned by the students. Now, I know a lot of you are anxious to get your hands on Portfolium, and our engineers are hard at work at preparing Portfolium for in-region hosting in 2020. But you can learn more about Portfolium from Portfolium's founder, Adam Markowitz, who is at our booth in the Product Lounge. While this work is happening, we're also envisioning a future for Portfolium that extends beyond this. So today you can think of Portfolium as a network of learners. But we wonder if it would make sense, and we want your input on this, to develop Portfolium into a network for learning. That is to say, imagine if students in Portfolium could start to explore career paths there on their own, with some sense of the skills and the knowledge that the industry says is important. That maybe they would even have opportunities to learn the skills that they need, whether that's through offerings that your school or college or university might provide, or through industry partnerships that we can facilitate. And finally, is it worthwhile to make it a place where learners can connect with each other around shared skills or common interests or questions around career paths? So these are things that we are thinking about, and we invite you to join us in this conversation because we will only figure out the right way forward into this uncertain future together. In the Del Lago video, you may have noticed that they call their students scholars. They said they're very deliberate with the language that they use because they know what you call yourself is tied to how you see yourself and how you act. And they're trying to develop future professionals. Relevant learning lets us become something. And of course, we become something not just by reading and studying, but by actively doing. In the skateboarding example that I started with, I think it was tempting to say that innovation in skating, that the identity of skateboarding changed because of the VCRs, because of the technology, but in hindsight, that doesn't really make any sense. Now, it certainly couldn't have happened without the VCRs, so you can say that technology was a catalyst for that innovation, but really it was because of the people who experimented, who failed, who got back up and iterated. We are seeing more institutions recreate their identity in the 21st century based on bold experiments and innovations. Now, from the outside, it might appear that transformation happens really quickly, happens overnight, but that's certainly not the case in any of the examples that I talked to. For example, Del Lago, it took them 5 years to get Competency X to where it is today, and they call it, it's pretty smooth. But they're already looking at the next stage, and part of the next stage for them is to share what they've learned and developed with the community, because they believe that if they can do it, anybody can do that. We know that innovators experiment and take risks, and that can be scary. We have to be bold. Our innovations will have the most impact. Our experiments will have the most impact when we're willing to share the results with our community, even when the results aren't great or the road isn't entirely smooth. And for me, that's what these CanvasCons are all about. We count on your support as we both work to improve the fundamentals of Canvas that you know, so that you can drive adoption and simplify great teaching and learning. And also as we try new things ourselves, because we believe we can do more to help impact student success at each and every one of your institutions. And more than ever before, we're counting on you to experiment, to innovate, with each other, perhaps with us, and to share back to the community. Because as this community grows, so does our belief, our confidence that together we're on the right track, and we can create the solutions that we need to deliver a new level of success to each and every one of our students. Thank you.